This show is all about interviewing interesting people and learning. Talking about your family's budget probably doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Certainly, it is not a sexy conversation to have. However, Brennan Schlagbaum is making finance fun, and he certainly is making it easy to understand. Brennan calls himself the budget dog. He has more than 1 million followers on Instagram. His videos, they go viral. They get millions of views. He's also a best-selling author as well. I know I'm going to learn a ton of information because he's on this program, and I know you are as well, and that is why I wanted to have him on my show. So Brennan is joining me now, and I'm so glad that you are here, the budget dog. You're here right now. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah. So just before we kind of get started, your bio says that you are helping parents build wealth. Why is that your mission today?
Great question. So when I grew up in the 2008 era, my whole entire family lost their house. And my dad was in the mortgage business. My mom was a private school teacher. We had 4 boys. I was the oldest of 4. And I saw the toll that took on my family. Now, I was young, so I was, in high school, I think at the time, 8th grade time. So for me, I felt the emotions. I felt the feelings in the house. I didn't fully understand what was going on, but it really spoke to me. So as I got older, and specifically when we left college, my wife and I had a lot of debt. And I flashed back to 2008 when I saw the toll it took on my family, emotionally, physically, everything. And I realized I don't want to be in the same position. And I love my parents to death, but I wanted to make sure my family was never put in a predicament that would lead us to potentially that. So I made sure right off the bat, my wife and I got really serious about our finances. We paid off a bunch of debt, $304,000 of debt in 5 years to be specific.
Wow.
And we went on to build a lot of wealth. And during that journey, I was just sharing it. And so the word and the name Budget Dog actually came, funny enough, from my wife telling me to basically share my story. And of course she was right. And typically I'm not really public and I'm not really public facing. I wasn't a big fan of sharing on social media. It wasn't what I was thinking would be the route I would go. I worked at Deloitte. I was a CPA. I was working in corporate. I was working my way to CFO level. And all of a sudden one day she's like, you need to go post this on Instagram. And that was a wake up call, but of course she was right. And I was like, well, what's my name? And my dog walked up right at that time, and I was kind of pacing around the room, and I was like, what would be a cool name for Instagram? Because I was posting maybe 10 times personally the last 10 years. So I did not post on social media. So I looked at my dog, and I said, Budget Dog. And it just clicked right then and there. And I laughed about it, but we created the account right then. We took a picture of his face, side profile, and that was the logo. And that was like my first couple followers. And we kept that the brand, honestly, for about the first 5,000 followers until eventually I realized I couldn't probably grow a business and brand as a dog. So I transferred that to a personal brand, and we kept the name at the same time because it was catchy. People loved it, and we got crazy results. So it was fun. It made finance fun.
Yeah. Now, at that point, had you guys paid off that, $304,000 worth of debt yet when you started this account?
It was actually about 50% of the way when we did, but the remaining portion was a big portion was the house, our personal residence. And so there was a big story. I talked about it, every single debt payoff milestone we talk about, very live and public and stuff. And people love to follow the journey. And so we paid it off during that time. So I was just getting out of all that debt. On a personal, the $76,000 of debt that was non-mortgage debt related, we paid that off before. But the whole journey of the house pay down, which was very contradictory online, that was a big, big story when we first started.
Yeah, I know, older generations are very familiar with Dave Ramsey, for example, and I feel like you are kind of like the modern day version, but you're more relatable, and I also feel like, a lot of people, again, Dave Ramsey, extremely successful, but he also does talk about religion quite a bit, and that is going to limit his audience, frankly, and so I think that. Like I said, you're making finance fun. You are appealing to a much younger audience. And I think also just, when you talk about 2008, I mean, if you grew up and you went through the 2008 recession, like yourself, you saw what could happen. And right now too, I mean, you have so many people right now that are on Instagram like yourself. However, they're seeing what you should be buying and what you don't have. And the pressure of Instagram to buy things is like relentless right now.
It's nonstop. Like, it's all I see. And specifically TikTok, Instagram is obviously there, and any other social media for that matter. But man, it's discouraging to see how much of that is pushed on a daily basis. We always talk about the pink tax, and that's a thing everybody knows of. But I think it's really a tax on the everyday person seeing that over and over and over, and that starts to play at you, play on you a little bit. And so you got to be very careful of seeing what you're actually looking at on a daily basis, what you're following, what your algorithm's suggesting, because that's driving your decision on a subconscious level that a lot of people, quite frankly, don't even understand that's happening. There's like, I see it, not a big deal, I'll go on. But there's this deep rooted issue that's happening in social media, and you have to be very, very aware of this, or it's going to get you.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about it in our newsroom about sales and advertising, and it is unbelievable what companies have access to and the amount of data that is out there. And I mean, you see it on your phone, you are looking at something, an advertisement, and then it is gonna follow you until you buy that thing and you put it on your credit card, and then you go into more and more debt. First off, let's kind of go back a little bit to more of your background. When did you decide to become a CPA? Because again, not the most like a sexy career. It's like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that. Hey, I want to be a CPA. Sure. When did you decide you wanted to be a CPA?
That's a good question. So honestly, when I first did it, it was a high school class and it was accounting. And I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I was taking some electives. That was one of the few classes that were available. And so I took it. I kind of got it. It was kind of okay. And so I went to college as a business major, or as a business general, studies. And so when I was there, I had to kind of figure out where I was going to go. And so I started off by taking a few accounting classes, and I realized like there's a piece of this that I enjoy because there's an answer to every single question that there is through math and through logic. And it made sense to me and it appealed to me. So as I was building my studies at the University of Louisville, I realized I wanted to be multifaceted. So I went ahead and also tacked on a finance major on top of that. And I started off as a CPA at Deloitte. However, I wanted to make sure I expanded because I knew CFO was on my agenda list long term, at least at the time. And that was my main focus. But I realized like the numbers, the logic, it just made sense. There was like another language to me that I think plays a major role in today's what I do, and I'm able to see things that others can't see, but very simply, and I can translate that into layman's terms to make their life a lot easier.
You family of 4 boys, you said?
4 boys. I was the oldest, and there were a lot of black eyes.
I was gonna say, you seem like the older kid, very responsible, like very, type A, like you got your stuff together. Were you always financially responsible? I mean, obviously you had some debt, but I mean, I think most people do have debt. It's just the amount of debt, what is that on the grand scale of things? But were you always financially responsible?
I was financially responsible, but I was also financially ignorant. So I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know how to invest. Nobody ever taught me. I took my McDonald's paycheck money and I put it right into a PNC bank account, and that lost me a lot of money. And so I wish I would have known that, to the point today that I've totally reversed that generational curse that my family had of like no education whatsoever. So I make sure we talk about investing for my daughters. Two daughters, 3 and 1 year old right now, about to turn 4 and 2. And I make sure that's a very big talking point in the house, even though they're that young. So when they get investments and stuff like that, I make sure that they talk about that, they hear about that. That's a culture that we lead. And that was just something growing up, I didn't really get a big foundation on. I was taught to keep my money. I was taught not to recklessly spend. I was taught to save, but I was never taught to invest.
Yeah.
And I think investing is the key to building real wealth. And if you save your money, as everyone knows, inflation's a real thing, and that's going to take you down the bad pathway.
I know you do hear a lot about, high yield savings accounts. That's something you're starting to hear a little bit more about. Is that kind of what you are, and we'll get into a little bit more about some of the things that you talk about, but is that kind of what you're alluding to, some of those kind of products versus just putting your money into just a bank account, for example?
Yeah, I think a high yield savings account's great, but that's a savings account nonetheless. So I
Okay.
always like to invest my money, right? I like to
Okay.
do index funds and ETFs and other types of investing, different accounts that are out there and available to everybody. So, high yield savings account, a lot of people, there's a lot of talk about that. It's a very popular topic, but I always like to reassure everybody that that's a savings mechanism. And so if you want to build real wealth, you can't save your way to building wealth, and it has to be investing, which are obviously other ventures like I mentioned.
Okay. Now, you were working at Deloitte and you quit the corporate job. You quit the, 9 to 5. I'm sure it was a lot more than 9 to 5.
I always call it the 5 to 9.
Yeah. Yes. How did you do that? And was it scary at first? And also, too, I know that they kind of had a problem with you doing some of these Instagram videos. Why do you think they had a problem with that?
Let's get into the whole story. So let's start back when I first decided and made that actual commitment in my head. So there was a time and place where I was running the brand. It wasn't extremely, people didn't know about it at the time. It wasn't that big. It wasn't a business. It wasn't generating revenue. And at the time, I was just kind of doing it for fun. It was a hobby. It was great to help people and stuff like that. And what it transpired into very quickly was a business venture. And when I noticed that, it was about October of 2021. I apologize, October of 2020. And I realized I had about 12 months if I could prove to myself I made at or above my 9 to 5 income, obviously with the savings back, obviously with my wife still working a 9 to 5, that we would be able to take that leap of faith. And so we worked our path. We were 10 months in, and Deloitte came knocking at my door. And it wasn't the plan I anticipated, but it was an ultimatum. And that was a crazy ultimatum. And basically, in short, I'll keep it PR here, is that the head of the office at Deloitte decided to come to me and say it was either Deloitte or the brand, and there was no in between. Now, this brand was not in conflict of anything. It was something totally separate of what I did. There were conversations internally about, can my wife run this? Can my team run this separately? And I won't be actually the person behind it. But since my face was out there, since it was my personal brand, there was no leeway. And so I politely said, thank you for your time here. And I told them the truth of, I'm going to pursue this.
Wow.
And I actually met with them the following Monday after we decided upon this. And this exact statement actually stuck to me. I post about this all the time, but the head of the office at Deloitte came to me and said that he was a budget dog connoisseur. So there was no conflict of interest. We had to disclose that every single year. Everything was disclosed. And so it caught me by surprise to a certain extent, but it's still big corporate and big brother. And so on Monday, following my decision that past Friday, the head of the office came and said that he, over the weekend, was a budget dog connoisseur, and he's become a budget dog connoisseur. And right then and there, that struck something in my brain to say, this is going to be massive, and this is going to be something that he knows about. And so, right or wrong, that's how I felt. That's what I proceeded to do. And within a year, that's what it was. And so, a lot of times, push comes to shove, and there's some scary moments that you have to take a leap of faith. That was one of the biggest leaps of faith I've ever taken, especially thinking CPA, type A, going back to the typical corporate world of getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. It was very foreign territory to jump out, do something crazy that I didn't have a role model. I didn't have somebody that came before me that did this whole Instagram business model. And it was at the time 2021. So this was before this was very commonplace or known. So, you have my parents saying, what are you doing? You have everybody in my family asking what this thing is. There's confusion, but I had to stay locked in, and I had to stay focused on the mission at play. And I knew very clearly in my head what that was going to be. And so when the time came, it was game time. And that's what we made happen.
What was the first video that, kind of hit gold for you?
I'm thinking back to that. I really don't know if there was like one huge video that like crushed or went, viral in the algorithm. I have a lot of posts, honestly, that go viral. The main focus that we hammer on are, parents and finance. And so that involves children, obviously, and investing for your kids. And almost every one of my child investing posts we'll go crazy. And I just know that's it. That shows me the market says we want to help our kids. We know as millennials, we weren't educated, we weren't, financially literate. And so how do we help our kids? We already know we're in a bad position. We want to fix ourselves and then we want to help our kids. And that's, I think, where it's coming from. But that angle is very, very strong.
Yeah. What were some of the things, because you've talked about it before, that you and your wife did, even pre-kids, to save some money, like here on the side, to pay off some of that debt? Just things that other people can take away from this interview.
Yeah, so the big thing was side hustles. We made $30,000 in 2019 from side hustles. And so this was as simple as a construction job in 2020. So my wife has an interior architecture background and design. And so 2020 is a drawing software. So she would contract with people all over the United States in her industry outside of the 9 to 5, and she would do these drawings. And she would be paid really, really well under the table, wink, wink. And so she would be getting paid for that. I would be getting paid for, for the construction jobs I was doing. And we just racked up a lot of hours in a side hustle. And we would take that money and we would put it towards our debt. We would put it towards our investments. And I always tell everybody it's a lot easier to make more money than to cut your expenses. I think the whole Ramsey philosophy out there, it's cut everything you have in your life, don't live life, beans and rice. And I don't really agree with that philosophy. I think that's a very unattractive philosophy. I think that's a pretty miserable lifestyle. And I don't think a lot of people really care to do that. And so I always think, why can't we play more offense and less defense? And I'm a sports fan growing up. I played sports and stuff like that. So I always think of things in sports terminology, but I think about playing offense, going to make more money, getting the job promotions, getting the job. You could hop jobs. You can get raises. You can switch careers. You can do all sorts of things, side hustles included, to make more money. And that's a lot easier than just cutting your $5 latte. That's the most unattractive thing in the world of finance.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of the lazy route. I mean, in my opinion, just kind of like listening to some of the information and advice that is out there. Mrs. Dow Jones, I follow her. I think she's kind of fun to follow too. But yeah, I mean, I remember I will never forget. There was a woman that I knew who was like following Dave Ramsey, and she like had no money like for the week, and she just wanted a Diet Coke, like literally just wanted a Diet Coke, and found a quarter in her couch and went to like the, like a vending machine or something, and was just like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever, but yes, I mean, that's a horrible way to live. And so,
Such a bad way.
So, but I will say though that you and your wife were committed, and so you have to commit. Once you commit to it, you need to commit to it, and you need to work hard. And you can't be like, oh my gosh, man, I gotta do more. Oh my God, I can't, woe is me. No, if you want to pay off the debt, you need to be serious about it. And is that right?
100%. The commitment is literally, I mean, like I talk about this all the time. I can give you the X's and O's of the playbook. I can give you the spreadsheet. I can give you all of the knowledge in the world. If you aren't committed to the process, you're not going to win in anything, let alone finance. And you have to be like all in. Like there's a lot of times people will say, and they'll DM me and they'll message me, and I just can get a feel in seconds of talking to somebody. Are they really about this or are they not? And like, are they really trying to pursue financial freedom or the goals that they want to hit or not? And I don't work with individuals that are half in, half out, because I don't really think that's going to get you anywhere. Like it's like anything. Like if you go all in, you're going to get the best result possible. If you don't, there's probably going to be a lot of skepticism, nerves, anxiety, whatever feelings are going on in your head, and it's going to prevent you from being the best version of yourself. So that's just the philosophy I roll with. And I know as my fellow millennials, I like to talk to them a lot about this, because there's good ones in our bunch, I promise, but there's also a lot that just don't understand what hard work is. And I don't want to sound like the old guy, but it's just the reality. And you're not going to get anything or achieve anything if you don't put the hard work in. That's just part of life.
Yeah. You did talk a little bit about why your content is resonating with a lot of people. And, you talked about your family, and your family is certainly a motivating factor for you as well.
Yeah, my family's everything. I mean, the first thing was obviously sharing the background of like how I grew up and the financial illiteracy that was in my family, as well as losing our house. That was the first motivator. And as I progressed, with my two daughters, like that's everything. So we got to make sure not only are my wife and I good, but those two girls are okay. And my daughter has Dravet syndrome. So the oldest of the two, there's a lot of complications from the medical side of things. It's not cheap, and it creates a lot of tension, and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes to make that a reality, to make sure she overcomes that. And the reality is that most families aren't going to be able to afford the out-of-pocket healthcare cost in today's world that it takes to do that. And so we've made a huge mission to give back in many different ways, but the medical cost behind a personal, the family themselves is really important to pay attention to. Outside of just the motivating factor of having kids and having a wife and having a spouse of some sort, there's more to it than just that, at least in our situation.
Some of the videos that you have, I mean, like 5.8 million views. When you're talking about at 23, you sold your soul to corporate. That is kind of your journey. That's your journey of kind of how you became the budget dog. 5.3 million views. I'm never sending my daughters to college because ... And then 4.8 million views. I will never feel guilty for living off my wife's salary because ... Something I think is great about you is you give your wife so much credit for her work, what she does for your daughters, what she's doing, around the house, whatever, where I think some people don't do that for women who are taking care of kids.
Well, first off, the situation that's in our household is, I would say it's 10 times the typical stay-at-home parenting job, especially for anyone that has dealt with special needs. But my wife has done a lot of stuff that people don't typically, I wouldn't say people see. People aren't seeing the credit that she should be getting. So a lot of the times I'm giving that credit publicly because people can't see that. People aren't able to see all of the stuff that she does. Right now she's outside walking with the daughter so my daughter doesn't have a seizure while we're recording this actively. And so these are things that I can't really share on a daily basis, but I do like to give her credit because these things are undeniably 2 times harder than what I do. I can tell you that for a fact. So not only is it 2 little kids, she's staying at home, but it's everything that goes into it on a daily basis. It's hard to even put into words because there's so many little things that add up that is a 24/7 job, truly.
Yeah. Well, again, props to you for publicly giving her that credit because, again, I think for some people out there, the stay-at-home moms, they don't get that credit, and so they should. I think
100% they should. I mean,
yeah.
It's harder than most of the jobs that are out there, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about some of these, just some of the things that you just talk about, because I think that is really going to help our audience here, and then they can learn more too by following you as well on Instagram. You just talk about, don't forget about the basics. So you're talking about kill any debt over 6%. That's kind of the threshold, right? So if you have an 18% interest credit card, a 26% interest credit card, oh my gosh, you got to tackle that first, right?
Yeah, when you're looking at the credit card balances and credit card debts and student loan debts and all of the debts that can accumulate very quickly, the first thing I do is look at interest rate. And so there's different schools of thought. When you look at balance first, you look at interest rate, but interest rate tells me the return on the dollar that I could get. So when I aim for that 6% target or above to pay off all of debt before you start investing, the reason I do that is because there's a very unlikely chance that I can guarantee myself a 6% or greater return in the stock market at any given point in time. Now that fluctuates. Obviously, the average return, 10% before inflation, but that's hard to get to in a consistent manner. And there's going to be years where you have 20% gains. There's going to be years when you drop 20%. And so there's a lot of volatility with that. And if I can target a 26% credit card debt that's guaranteed to be a return, I'm going to use all my money to pay that specific debt off. And anything below 6%, we can have a conversation about lifestyle and what you value essentially as to what should you pay off first, and does the debt matter? Does it keep you up at night? Those types of questions. But from a numbers perspective, I always look above that 6% mark. We got to attack very fast.
Okay. You talk about maxing your 401k if that is offered. Well, I get you max your 401k regardless, right?
It's 100% return on your money. It's the most obvious I think, money move that you can possibly make. It's such a low lift, high ROI. You match that 3%, that 6%, whatever you get at your job, and they give you a 100% match. And there's no such thing in the money world as that. So I always say, do the basics really well. Those things are easy, low lift, low energy type of things that you can just click a few buttons, take advantage of 100% returns, and then you'll be good on your way. So those are easy things outside of the more complicated strategies.
Setting up automated investments. So let's say that you have tackled some of that debt. What do you mean setting up an automated investment? And where can someone go if they're kind of like just kind of a fish out of water?
So you can always follow my content. We walk through every step of the equation. And obviously content comes in, bits and pieces. So making sure you actually deep dive into the YouTube and the podcast and all the other areas of content on a deep level that we provide. But the biggest thing when you're looking to automate your investments, all that means is you're taking a specific dollar amount from your bank account on a periodic schedule. Let's say that's every 2 weeks or every month. And you're putting that into that investment, but you're not doing that manually each time. You've set up an automation in order for that cash to hit your investment account and for it to be invested. And the reason that's so powerful is because we're human and there's a lot of stuff going on. And I always go back to thinking about our personal life and how much stress that would cause me if I manually did everything. And so I don't think I've spent more than 30 minutes a month on my finances in about 10 years. So when I build a automated financial system with all my students, it's all these automations going every which way, but it's a very simple model and it's based on understanding the person's goals, understanding where they're trying to get to, understanding their risk profile, making sure they're educated, and then setting up their outcomes. So if you, for example, put $500 a month into the Roth IRA, by X date, with some assumptions, of course, what that will turn into. And so instead of guessing through your whole entire financial life, which creates the anxiety, which creates the nerves and all the scared feelings around money, you can actually predict with pretty good certainty as to what's going to happen. And so what I like to do is just set everything up, educate them, ask them what their goals are, walk them through step by step. And from there, they have a lot of confidence and clarity. So I always say the end goal of the academy and what we help students with is to provide confidence and clarity, and it only should take less than 30 minutes a month. Most times, people are doing too much, spending too much time getting worse results by not automating. So I always highly recommend automating for that reason.
And automated, would that also be even just putting money into like a 529 account for your kids, if that's something that you want to do, save for college for your children? Because I mean, those accounts typically do pretty well.
I would say it's investments, it's bill pay, it's debt pay down, it's every single financial move that you possibly can make, especially the 529. So that's one of the investment options. You have the IRA, you have the 401k, you have the taxable brokerage, maybe the HSA. There's a lot of different types of accounts out there, and whatever your situation entails and whatever goals you're trying to include or reach, those are the accounts that we will focus on of the automation component.
Okay. There's a lot of talk about a possible recession that is coming. Some of the job growth.
Did Kiyosaki say that?
there's some, job growth is slowing a little bit, and finally the Fed is talking about lowering interest rates. So maybe if you bought a home, you can refinance eventually. Or maybe people are finally going to start kind of buying homes again, if they can, let's say, even though we might have a recession on the way. But if you're a qualified buyer, maybe you'll get off the sidelines and buy a house now. You have said you can turn a recession into generational wealth. How is that possible?
Education. And so the more educated you are in recessions and what those actually mean, and then also how you can maximize the potential of those things, is how you build generational wealth. And so ever since the beginning of time, when I started investing, early 2010, 2011, 2012 time, I've heard that there will be a recession every single year since that date. And so that's always going to be the case. People are pessimistic and they're always going to say there's an upcoming recession, or we have, something's boiling and the housing market's going to explode, or the stock market is going to explode. The thing is, all that means is those underlying assets, they're compressing in price. And when you look at that as an opportunity. So if I walked into Target, let me rephrase myself. If my wife walked into Target and she saw 20% off on a pair of shoes, she would tell me, that sounds like a good deal. However, when the average individual sees the stock market drop, they don't walk into the stock market and say, that sounds like a good deal. They say, I need to get out as soon as possible. And I always like to tell them that your asset prices are temporarily compressed. Those are going to come back up, assuming you have good quality assets. So you're buying at a discount. So every time the market drops, I love that. Anytime there's volatility in the market up and down, I love that. But a lot of people don't educate themselves on the data around that. And there's a lot of data points to suggest that if you buy low cost ETFs and index funds and you buy at lows and you dollar cost average into these, all the things I talk about, you're going to come out in the positive. It might be scary. There might be a temporary price adjustment. Your account balance might go down. I've had $100,000 swings before, but it doesn't faze me because I know what's going to happen long term.
ETFs, what is that? Just for people out there who might not know what that, because I know you throw that out there a lot.
So it stands for exchange traded funds, and all that is a basket of stocks in short. So if I put $100 into a basket, $6 goes to Apple, $5 goes to Nvidia, $3 goes to Meta, so on and so forth. And you can buy lots of different baskets. You could buy one with thousands. You could buy one with a couple hundred. You could buy one with 50. And so you have to understand which avenue in the market you want to go, which sector you want to attack. Is it a broad market sector? Is it a specific technology sector? And those things are very easy to get to. In conclusion, it takes me 3 hours to explain that through my framework, but it's easy to get to that conclusion if you have an actual framework. And people overcomplicate it, to be honest. It's 1 to 5 index funds. Keep it simple. Don't do anything more than that. And you don't need to be a genius to do this. You can be the everyday person. My IQ is debatably over 100. I like to joke about that a lot, but I hope it's above that. But my point is you don't have to be a genius to build real wealth. It's pretty common sense, and it's pretty just everyday type of stuff, just applying the basics and common sense to the financial markets.
Yeah. What is the 500 trust fund baby? Because you've talked about that too.
So if you put $500 into an investment portfolio, and that could be 529, that could be a Roth IRA, that could be an UTMA, that could be a taxable brokerage, different types of accounts for different purposes for that child. If you do that for a long period of time, with assumptions of 10% returns, which is historically speaking where the market's been, there's almost a guarantee that you will be able to build $1 million fund within 20 to 30 years. And the thing is, most people overcomplicate this and think that you have to do something miraculous to do that. And you just don't. All you do is need to invest consistently for a long period of time. Ignore the news. Don't pay attention to what every news headline or what every tweet says out there, and just keep it consistent. I always say my biggest trick is consistency, and that's not an exaggeration. It's because I've never missed a debt paydown. I've never missed an investment, and I've just done it for a long time. And so that's what happens when you do this. And so I'm trying to show people real time, this is how you really can build wealth.
You talked about also financial advisors, and this is something for me too. I have a financial advisor, and my husband and I, we pay him a little commission. What is your recommendation on that?
Yeah, this is a heated debate online. My advisor friends don't like me for saying this. I like to educate, and that's what I'm primarily focused on. So I want to be very clear when I say that. There is what's called an AUM fee. And so AUM fee is how a lot of financial professionals get paid. Asset under management. So there is a piece, let's call them an AUM of 1%. That piece is getting extracted from an individual's portfolio every single year, okay?
Yeah.
And that builds. Not only is the fee itself, but the lost compounding effect of what those fees would have been if you would have kept that money. And so when you do the math on this, it can amount to 6 and 7 figures long term. Now, the debate is, do you think that is worth it, or do you think it's not? My take, generally speaking, is that I believe somebody should self-educate themselves and keep it in-house, meaning you do it yourself. Because if you build what we build, it only takes 30 minutes a month, and it's super simple to automate this whole process. And most up to $1 million net worth do not need a financial advisor. Now, if you complicate things and you have four businesses over here, and you have 8 real estate, buildings over here, and you have 3, insurance funds, and there's a lot more complexity to your life. Maybe special needs plays a role. Maybe at that point in time, you could use a financial professional, and I don't fault anybody for doing so. I just like them to be aware on an educational basis of how much it really can cost.
Yeah, it is expensive. And I will say financial planners, they live a very nice life.
They do. I always Dave Ramsey used to joke about the banks have the nicest buildings, the financial advisors have the nicest couches, and that's just the reality of the financial world. I think that's a big reason why I do what I do, is because I see Wall Street as this big Goliath that's telling everybody this is so complicated, and I'm like beneath the hood, and I built all of this wealth, and I'm like, this isn't that complicated. Like, if we know some basics, fundamentals, we put this into play, we should all be building wealth at a fast rate. But the thing is, there's so many other variables to the human psychology that's preventing people from doing so. And so some people will, and some people won't. That's just the reality of life.
Yeah. I'm assuming a big pro to social media for you is that you've been able to build your business. You've been able to reach so many people.
Yeah, it's been an amazing thing. You know, honestly, not how it started. Like I mentioned earlier, I saw my family struggle. We were just sharing our story. My wife was like, "You love this stuff, just go put it out there." And of course she was right. And so from that, people started telling me what they needed, and I didn't have it, to be honest. And so I think I spent, for the first 18 months of the brand, free 30-minute, 1-hour calls with people that wanted help, and I would just find a way to solve their problem for them. And I was just figuring it out on the go. I used the tools that we use internally, and I just helped them. And I listened to what they had to say, and they told me what they wanted. And I started offering free classes and free events and putting together systems and products and all this type of stuff. And people loved it. And obviously to this day, you know, it's turned into an actual business. So it's been awesome.
What has been a negative thing for you because of social media?
There's a lot of people that lack context, as you can probably imagine, Ellen.
Yeah.
You put something out there, you say something, and they know 1/10 of what you just said. Or they come into your story in chapter 9 when you've already written the first 8 chapters, and they don't understand context. And that is one of the biggest pet peeves of myself. Just seeing that over and over, the commentary on, I mean, you have a lot of insight into the human psyche when you have millions of followers, you post something, and all of a sudden the comments go crazy. You can understand where people are, and it's sad because there's a lot of limiting beliefs in those comments. And I always say, if somebody really read those comments and then understood the context that I have on those comments, they would be a lot wealthier. But instead, they don't take the time to educate themselves, to deep dive into the context of which I have, to help themselves. So they only are hurting themselves by doing that. But that's a downfall, of course.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be pros and negatives. That's the way it is. And
I'm
again,
used to it. I've seen a lot.
Again, but if you take the knowledge that you're putting out there, you know, you might pay down your debt. You might have a very nice life, and you know, you're just putting it out there for people to use. So that's what you're doing. Budget Dog Academy. And what is your handle before we go?
Yeah, so my handle is @BudgetDog on every social media platform.
Okay.
I also have budgetdog.com, which is my website, and I help individuals, typically between the ages of 22 and 50 years old, pay off debt, learn to invest, or maximize their situation if they have a bunch of cash flow on the sidelines. People that are struggling mentally with finance as well, we have behavioral psychologists on staff, and we really focus on the psychology behind the money, because that's really where the money's made. It's not the actual X's and O's typically, but we cover it all.
Brendan, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. I learned a lot. I know our audience did as well. And thank you for joining me on this episode of The Curious Bee. More episodes up right now on Fox Local.